come back with a recommendation on whether to include that as a as an option, used car, as a CUP option in C2, which I'm not sure I'm in favor of either. But there may be other options that we can explore too. I'm not sure what all we have in the zoning code, special use permits versus land use permits versus conditional use permits. There may be some other ground that we haven't explored yet. And what I'd like to do is table this so that we don't send a denial yet. Leave this on the table right now while we take a look at what our options are, because no enforcement action will be taken on this while the application is correct on the table. So I think that kind of takes the heat off of a little bit from staff having to enforce an expired permit. Correct. When this is on the table still. So I think that way the way I would suggest. How long do we need to table this to feasibly work that out? Because I don't want to table it till next month and set some time motion for how many times this can be continued.
It's also a public
hearing. I know
hearing.
We have some time constraints, and when we can continue the public hearing, but I know there's some time constraints on some applications as to how many times they can be continued. Do we know if we're going to set up? Can we look at that real quick?
Madam Chairman, Commissioner, I don't think there's a risk of continuing it too many times by just jumping to the next month. That's my understanding. I think the question is what do we bring back to you in a month? And it could be our opinion about what the options are. Mm-hmm. It could be if we think if it's legally a workable option, bring back to you a text amendment. And I think maybe it's best if you provide us some direction, but also provide us the flexibility to do what is most practical and most effective considering the time constraints. Keep in mind that the letter that's attached to the staff report is the letter we provided the applicant, and it does grant them 90 days beyond the expiration date. So they have until June. You can easily burn up a lot of time, but I think we're still in good shape on the time limits.
Well, what I'd like to see is a direction for staff to come back next month with a recommendation on how to proceed. If we have any options, I'd like to look into any special use permit, any type of conditional or special use that we can put in place under C2 that would allow this non-conforming use for a period of time.
And I believe in our conversations today with taking this issue out and looking at just the rezoning, that there's not very much favor for the rezoning. I think it's just to fix the issue in what's already presented before us. So,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
To fix the mistake.
it's to fix the mistake, it's not to rezone it, so.
So you would not, we're not seeking to propose a change to the ordinance that would allow it by right. We want used cars subject to a conditional permit
Looking at
that we're discussing.
the words, you could put new or used like it is in C3 instead of how it's written currently in C2.
But in C2, it's allowed, new cars are allowed by right.
Right, I would suggest it says new or used.
Okay.
It's still under conditional.
It's conditional.
It's under.
You can do what's might surprise some of the people in the audience, but do what is most practical and timely.
What's the time requirement for advertising a public hearing?
Amy knows the answer to that.
2 weeks?
It's about 3 weeks is the deadline for the public notice. However, due to the way the calendar falls and the newspaper's publishing schedule, it winds up being about 4.5 weeks for getting the ad to the newspaper, which would mean that we would need to have that prepared by next Monday, so just a few days.
So,
Not
gotta
much
work
time,
quick
and
on
then-
finding the options.
From C2, this is general business to C Commercial District, Acre Road, held by half of the staff.
Technical difficulties today. We didn't internet access, no phone access, no email, so it's been a little difficult. Normally, we put together slides to present, we'll do our best. You don't think mic's not on? Okay, well, I'll speak, how about now? Well, just as if we're public hearing tonight, and we really aren't. This is really a report to you. The question at last meeting, whether we should bring back an item for action, and we're not doing that. We're not asking you to take any action on anything. This is simply a report and gives you an opportunity to provide us with direction. Mr. Singh, Mr. Jones, Ms. Jones are here tonight, the owner and the operator of Singh Auto Sales. If you have any other questions or if you want to give them an opportunity to respond to this. Again, this isn't a hearing. You conduct the meeting the way it's really just a report. There's an recommended that you not approve the rezone. There was a lot of reluctance on the part of the commission, as you voiced, to approve a rezone for the property for various reasons. There are a lot of criteria that need to be met, and it was difficult to meet all those criteria. However, there was also a lot of discussion about it seemed unfair or overly restrictive to say that the city wouldn't consider auto sales. The commission asked staff to bring back alternatives to a rezone, and so that's what we've done. What we presented in this memo are amending the zoning ordinance text. The text is ordinance amendment, so actually show you what that would look like as an actual text amendment. There are different ways of doing that, but we just wanted you to see exactly what that looks like. The third alternative does not involve doing an ordinance at all. It's processing as a special use permit. And we provided the text of that paragraph in the special uses chapter, section 18.145.020, paragraph 26. It's not black and white or crystal clear that that's how that would be, that could be done, but in staff's opinion, in my opinion, the used car sales could be examined and perhaps approved through a special use permit under the provisions of that chapter. And so, of the three alternatives, staff feels that's the preferred alternative. It doesn't involve advised by the city administrator. It requires you to count the works and providing direction in a work session. The outcome of that's not certain. So it's kind of it's using too heavy-handed of a tool or too heavy of a tool to solve the problem at hand. In staff opinion, and special use permit would be that. Just if the city were to approve a rezone, or if it were to amend the text of the zoning ordinance under the second alternative, that doesn't mean that the way the property is being used today as a used car lot could continue in the exact same way it's being used. The applicant would have to apply for a land use permit to be reviewed by staff. That would give staff an opportunity to look closely at the site and the parking and circulation on the site, how that functions. Right now, there's some questions about whether there's enough space for the amount of cars they have on the site, whether the circulation and parking is safe. But that would still have to be addressed. For the special use permit, that would all happen in one application, which is probably the best way to handle it, the most efficient way, but also it's not wait, you have your rezone and now you're going to review your land use permit and you're not going to get exactly what you wanted. The special use permit would all be handled in one shot. And that's really that summarizes our alternatives, our analysis of the alternatives, and I'll stand for questions. You can turn it up to someone else if like, but I just close my remarks.
Questions from commissioners?
So right now they had, or when they were granted, when this was approved, they were approved for a land use permit for 6 months, is that correct?
That is correct.
What's the normal term for a land use permit?
Well, under that provision, under which that was permitted, there's nothing specific about how long. That was done at the discretion of the staff person who issued the land use permit. It was issued by the codes administrator. It was also issued on the understanding that it was a use that was allowed in that zone.
Yeah. Didn't it expire 6 months after it was issued?
Yes, it expired in March.
What was the theory in putting in?
The way it explained to me is that the codes administrator would see how problems, issues, and that if it was not, then they could come back and perhaps be issued an extension of the permit. That be permanent or temporary, I don't know. And again, I'm hearing that kind of secondhand.
I know you're not, I mean, you're relatively new to this position, but is there any sort of that just seems kind of strange that a permit would only be issued for 6 months, pending the city seeing how the facility was used. Is that normal?
It's not clear that that's normal or that's expected in the zoning ordinance. There are other types of permits that are temporary in nature or at least seasonal in nature. And the ordinance is a little bit confusing because some of those provisions are in different chapters of the ordinance. In my opinion, the special use permit chapter is very broad in terms of the large variety of uses that you can get permits for regardless of zoning. So it starts getting kind of confusing.
Mentioned at our last meeting, or why is that available now, a month later than it was?
We weren't aware that that was an option. The app applied for RESA. We responded to their application, and we made a recommendation to look for this. To me, but after looking at that again, it appears to be an option.
Special use permit. Yes, it's not 5 years and it is 2 years, but I'm going to have to agree with Commissioner Godwin that there's no certainties in all of this. We may approve it at some future date, and like you said, next council may just flat out say absolutely not. So I guess it becomes something that we're trying to do, correct or wrong, give you guys the opportunity to try to find a better place, possibly if your business. I so hope your business succeeds to the point where you do. Lord knows we need a used car lot in this town. I'd rather put my money here than in a like. So, and I hope you can find another space that's much bigger. You can have more inventory. That spot, in my opinion, is just not conducive to a car lot for you guys. Temporarily, yes it is. It will give you guys the ability to be able to try to sell what you can and find a bigger lot somewhere.